Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome to Our Issues Birmingham. We're meeting with John Archibald today. And John, welcome to our show again.
Thank you. Good to be here.
You were our first guest. I think I've told you that before.
It's amazing that you got a second show.
Well, actually, we're approaching our 200th show, and we were trying to have you on the 200th show, but it didn't work out that way. So you're like in the 190s or something. But
I'm proud to be there.
Everything going okay for you in Boston?
It is. It is. I survived a real winter and everything.
And you're coming back to Alabama at some point?
I am. I will be there any day now.
Oh, really?
Well, June.
Okay.
I will be there.
We'll talk about that in a minute. What I want to talk about right now is your new book. And I'm not here to plug your new book, but I won't say read in detail your new book, but I have skimmed it. And I have particularly fondness for the little paragraphs that appear at the beginning of each chapter, which are precisely your father's words. And I trust you were able to take those from a stack of documents you found in the attic one day or something.
Yeah, in the basement, a couple of file cabinets with every sermon he ever gave over the course of a 50-plus year preaching career. So, which were dated and noted and fastidiously filed. So that I could look at those sermons and check the chronology of what was going on in the world at that time.
That's what I was going to get to, the chronology, because I think the main theme you're trying to put forth in this book is that there were ministers of all different denominations who were preaching from the pulpit during the 60s when Martin Luther King was arguing for civil rights in Alabama, had Bull Connor and Albert Boutwell creating the tension that you have shown me in this book wasn't being addressed from the pulpit directly. Mm-hmm. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. I mean, that's a big part of it. And, it stems from the fact that I was born in April of 1963. At that precise moment in time, Dr. King was in jail writing the famous letter from a Birmingham jail, which, among other things, excoriated the white church for its silence on those issues.
Precisely.
But it wasn't just the church. I mean, it was boardrooms and city halls and people of all description. I just sort of used what was familiar to me as the vehicle to tell that.
Well, to me, in reading the book, it helped me understand why you have been accused at times of being contentious about things that bother you about what you see happening, whether it's political or socially unjust or in some way imbalanced. And so I see your father and his message coming through your writings, except in a different context. Do you think
and
there's
in a
some of that
style? I think I'm a lot more likely to use a baseball bat rhetorically and he was more likely to use honey, perhaps. But yeah, I come from this long line of preachers, so maybe there's part of them that rubbed off.
Well, fast forward, 2021, 1963, post-1963. Now you have a historical perspective. Some might say not much has changed. There has been change, but there's still that tension that Martin Luther King talked about. And I think it's even greater primarily because we have access to media that puts it in our face that didn't exist in the 60s.
And, one of the things about, growing up around Birmingham, particularly as a white guy, there was so much going on in the 50s and 60s that most white people in this town didn't know or didn't pay attention to or didn't fully understand. And we weren't taught that in schools in that generation. We weren't taught that through the 70s, I can attest. And so many of those of us who were taught with textbooks that told us excuses rather than truths. So I think that many of the people who we grow up with and love and care about and are next door neighbors to and all of that don't really have a clear picture of what went on in our own city and what went on before the civil rights movement or during or even after. So I think that's a big part of it. It took me to be fully grown before I, understood to ask any of these questions about, what my dad was saying from the pulpit and many other things.
Well, I think also our sense of social awareness, for me, sixth, seventh grade, going into high school during this time frame that you're being birthed. John Carroll is where I went to school. We were one of the first schools to be integrated. But we can talk more about that when we come back. But I don't think the depth of perception existed amongst the citizens, the white citizens particularly. Don't go away. We'll be right back. This is Our Issues Birmingham. I'm talking with John Archibald. Stay with us. So right before we cut to break, we were talking about the lack of individual social awareness of the tension and what brought about the tension, particularly for people who were in their high school years or even in their college years. They weren't being told what was really at issue here that brought this tension about. And therefore, they lacked an awareness, or either they didn't care.
Yeah. And people, you're a little bit ahead of me and in my generation. I mean, we really, I was in first grade in 1969. So, so coming in, I came into integrated classes in the second grade, and that was true throughout my schooling, which is, I always felt like that was sort of the golden age of integration. But when we got to know each other pretty well, but we didn't still know the history and why there was so much turmoil, the bombings or any of the things that led to it. But through that period and beyond, I think we thought we were making real progress along the way a lot of the time, and it's only been really in the most recent years that it has become increasingly evident that we haven't. And so a lot of the language we're hearing today, is more reminiscent of what you would have heard in 1960 than it is in what you would have heard in 1970 or 80 or 90 or 2000. And so, that's a cause for great concern for me is when, all of a sudden you think you make progress in this area, in this very special place in the civil rights movement and beyond, then it's disconcerting to realize, maybe we're going the other way.
Today,
Mm-hmm.
as we speak.
I'm saying, yeah, it seems like we're going backwards rather than forwards in the most recent of years, despite much progress that's been made in the courts and otherwise. I think that people are less ashamed to be racist now than they were for the last 50 years.
And probably less are more reluctant to acknowledge that they are in fact racist, because they don't feel
Right.
like they're racist.
They don't. They feel they're aggrieved. And, that's a dangerous place to be. I mean, we can all feel aggrieved
Birmingham,
one way or another, but that doesn't give us the right to, villainize whole groups of people.
Birmingham was given the nickname Birmingham, and um, quite candidly, until I read your book, I always thought it was about the 16th Street Church. But
Yeah.
unbeknownst to me, there had been up to 40 bombings.
More than 40, between
Plus.
45 and 65. And I mean, we had a lot of dynamite, and we had a lot of Klansmen, and we had a lot of racial tension, and a lot of bombs were planted, and a lot went off. Not all of them went off. But, that's something most people growing up, had no clue about in our generation and the generation that followed. And certainly now, in some ways, I think generations now, at least they're better educated on it in some degree. But there are a lot of people in Birmingham who don't know who Fred Shuttlesworth was, despite the name of the airport, who don't know what happened in that spring of '63 and beyond. So despite the fact that this city tries to, the Civil Rights Institute and everything else, tries to educate people, a lot of people don't really want to know. I mean, that's really one of the things I wanted to tell. That's, this book is sort of a memoir, and it's sort of a search for what my dad said, but it's also sort of a primer in basic Birmingham history, hidden in there, hopefully hidden in there.
Well, do you have a proposal? If you had a wish list of how we could at least start or initiate a more proactive approach to trying to fix what you've pointed out in both this discussion and in your book?
Fixing is hard, but the whole premise of this is, my whole belief is that so many of the wrongs that have been created here or elsewhere, but I'll stick to here because that's what I know, is, whether we're talking about, the Civil War or Reconstruction or the writing of our Constitution in the name of white supremacy, or Jim Crow, or the Tuskegee syphilis experiments, or voter suppression, or civil rights movements or bombings, any of those things could not have happened with the freedom that they happened unless people of goodwill who knew better and thought better if they had not remained silent, it would not have been able to happen. So my goal is that if we can look back and see even the people we most admire lacking the will or the courage or the ability to speak through the peer pressure or the conspiracy of silence that kept them silent, if we can see them, then we can see ourselves maybe a little bit better. And because trust me, I write a lot of things and I say a lot of things, but it's the silence that bothers me most. If I don't, if I'm not able to find the words to stand up for something that I feel is important, then I have failed. And I think we all have that in little and big ways. And so my goal is that if we learn to speak more confidently, not more angrily, but more confidently, we have a shot.
Very good point. And we all could play a role in trying to accomplish that. We're going to take another break. We're going to shift away from this subject and get a little more current with things that are going on in your life and when you plan to come back to Birmingham and start bothering people like me. This is Our Issues Birmingham. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. This is Our Issues Birmingham. I've been speaking with John Archibald, who really needs no further introduction in this area about, and now perhaps nationally, there's been a nice piece in the Washington Post about you and your book. But I want to talk more about what you've been doing up there, and has it worked out well for you, and when you're coming back, and when you get back, what you're going to be doing here. So take it.
Yeah, well, I'm doing a Neiman Fellowship at Harvard, which sounds ridiculous, as we may have talked about before. I've never felt dumber in my life, despite the fact that most everybody in Birmingham has called me dumb at one point in time. Another was probably right. But
do you feel
it's part of this
yourself
fellowship that brings
surrounded
journalists
with
from
nerds?
around the world to kind of study and get their heads right again. And so I've been taking a lot of classes, everything from science and cooking to to Eastern and Western philosophy with Cornell West. But I've also I've taken a couple of different playwriting classes, which I never thought I would want to take, but I was trying to get into a screenwriting class and couldn't get in. And so I got into a playwriting class instead and found out that I really love it. So I've been writing these dark and sinister plays with dark humor and hope someday to get one produced. But my whole goal is to try to figure out different ways to tell stories as I get older, and so to remain flexible in this changing media world, you've got to be able to tell stories in a lot of different ways. And I'm hoping to learn as many as I can.
Yeah, storytelling is a big part of my business as well. And I don't mean story in the falsehood sense. I mean in communicating whatever you're trying to communicate to the audience that you've selected to communicate it to, or the audience that you've been given to communicate it to. Will you be back with AL.com when you return?
Yeah, I will. I'll be back in June, ready and willing to go. I do want to take on some bigger, longer term kind of stories in addition to writing the column. And I do want to try to use some of these different mediums. I mean, we've done podcasting some and done some videos and done some, animated history of Alabama and things like that are always fun. They're not always as successful as we want. And so we've learned a lot from every time we've done it. And I really just feel like there are a lot of different, people don't always read like they used to, but I love the written word, so I'm going to write. But I'm also going to try to use different techniques for doing that, whether it's books or, Lord knows if I don't know how plays fit into that, but I'm going to get a play done in Birmingham.
Well, there's a lot of good local theater here. And so perhaps you can fall into that for starters. And then maybe we can find our way to Quentin Tarantino. Is that the kind of dark humor you're referring to? Because that's very dark.
Well,
At times.
There's no blood spatter yet, as far as I know. But the one I'm working on now is about death and hypocrisy. So it's a lot like a column I might write. But it's all of course, as you would expect, it all has some sort of social or political commentary, hopefully buried deeply enough so that it doesn't keep you from being entertained at the time, which is I guess the trick when it comes to those things that are built as entertainment rather than news.
Is being at Harvard an awe-inspiring event where you walk through the campus and go, what am I doing here? How did I get here?
Yeah, you walk right by, Longfellow's house and where George Washington was, and all of the, great minds that people had. Plus the fact that it's just such an international place that the world seems so much bigger than it usually does when I'm concentrating on petty corruption at the Waterworks Board or
that's over
City
now.
Hall.
I think.
But it makes me feel kind of small. But that's a good thing.
Yeah. Are the people that you are, I don't want to say in class, are you doing virtual? Or are you actually in a class?
We're doing virtual everything, but all of the fellows get to meet out in the yard a lot of the time. But Harvard is shut down everything, so all of the buildings are locked up. But I guess the world's getting used to Zoom. Just hopefully we'll be able to see each other soon.
Are the people that you're there with similarly situated as you? I mean, I'm sure you see the undergrads, the law
Yeah.
school people running around. And
Yeah,
then
well, they've
there's-
limited. They brought in the first semester I was here. They brought in the freshmen and left everybody else where they were. In the last semester, they brought in the seniors so they could get ready for graduation and sent the freshmen back home. So everybody's, across the world doing Zoom classes. Some of them is, I mean, some with 8 people and some with 240. So it's a wide range of experiences. But some of the teaching techniques are amazing, and some are better than others.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Appreciate
We
you
look
having me.
forward to your return to Alabama to share your experiences both through the written word and the spoken word, and perhaps even the playwright word. So
Can't
thanks
wait.
a lot for being here. This is Our Issues Birmingham. We'll see you next week. Thank you, John.